This week on Merchants of Change, we've got Jennifer Beale. She played Division I hockey at Brown University before making her transition to the professional world. She got her start in sales with HubSpot, starting as a BDR in the early days and climbing the ladder to her current position as a MidMarket Account Executive. Here she is, Jennifer Beale.
I'm J.R. Butler, co-founder and CEO of the Shift Group, and you're listening to Merchants of Change. This is a podcast about transferring the skills and behaviors we acquire as athletes and military veterans into becoming a professional salesperson. Each week, we'll introduce you to a top performer who will help us understand how they became professional merchants of change.
What's up, kid? Today on the show, we've got Jennifer Beale. Jennifer, great to see you again.
Good to see you, JR. How are you?
Little context for our audience. Jennifer and I have known each other since we were teenagers. We grew up in the same New England hockey circles. So this is a little bit of a reunion. So Jennifer, our the context for the show, when I started the company 2 years ago, a big part of what we do is destigmatizing sales for, young professionals, right? Everybody thinks of, the used car salesman. And, for me, when I was young, seeing people that were like me, but were, 5, 10, 15 years into their career and crushing it made me that was like the first hump I had to get over, right? And then actually doing it helped me understand that it's not high pressure tactics, pushing products and, lying to people. It's consulting and helping people solve problems and achieve goals. So one of the big things that I wanted to do right from the jump was get people with the same backgrounds of our candidates, which are former athletes at the college or pro Olympic level, and military veterans, and get guests that came from that background and have found success in sales. So what we like to do, we kind of go start in the athletic career, talk about your transition, and then just kind of riff a little bit on your experiences and lessons learned in sales. It's great. It's great for our candidates, but it's also great. We have a big audience of folks that are a few years into sales and still figuring things out. So let's jump right in. I always start with a really broad question to get you chatting. You're a hockey player. What are your favorite memories from your hockey career?
So many. I mean, I think my time at Nobles is my favorite, simply because, so just context-wise, playing in Assabet Valley was really fun, and we were young, and the teams were filled with people that were incredible. Casey Bellamy was on that team. I consider probably one of the best female hockey players to ever play. Those teams are filled with fun, awesome times, but I think my time at Nobles, it was such an invigorating place. It demands excellence. They demand excellence in school and in sports. And my dad was helping coach that team with Tom Rezor, and I just really enjoyed that particular time. I enjoyed my time at Brown as well, but I think Nobles was probably just the most invigorating, fun, challenging time, both academically and in sports.
I couldn't agree more. I got taken out of Marlborough High School and put up in Western Massachusetts and Cushing. And I was way out of my element, but a rising tides lifts all boats, to your point. It's such those types of institutions are such a transformative experience at that age. I'm sure you're the same as me. My best friends are my Cushing friends because we grew up together.
I'm still extremely close with all my high school friends, all my hockey friends. We come back to the Nobles reunion every single year. They're just phenomenal people. I love them.
Was that Assabet team? Did you guys win a national championship on that team?
Yeah, we won 2. So we won a U12 national championship in Anchorage, Alaska. I think the second one was a U16 national championship in Michigan. Yeah, we won 2 national championships with Assabet. We won 2 ISL championships at Nobles, a New England championship with Nobles. there was some cool stuff there. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Those teams were filled. And I would say every person on those ASVIT teams played Division I or in the Olympics.
Amazing, amazing. I was at the 2018 Olympics in South Korea because my brother
Very
was
cool.
on the men's team. So seeing Casey, who I've known from UNH with my brother, and then also Megan Duggan was
She's
my
incredible.
my
They're all
prom
growing.
date. She was my prom date. Her and Erica Lawler were my prom date my senior year at Cushing.
She's an unbelievable ambassador for the game and just a phenomenal human being. And I could go down this track about the sports stuff, but let's just say she was always bigger, stronger, faster than me. That's for sure.
We're both very grateful for the luck we had to grow up around the people we did. What kind of teammate were you? Like, how would your teammates describe you?
That's a great question. So I was going to say this before or talk about this in relation to sales, but I think, I wasn't always the fastest, strongest player, right? But I was really smart. And I think the key to sales or the key to sports is knowing what you're good at and focusing, working on what you're not great at and focusing on what you're good at. I had a mind for the game. I think that came from, growing up in a hockey family and having a dad who was involved in hockey and always being around really great coaches. There's some good coaches and there's bad coaches, in any sport. And I think being around the really great ones just shaped me as a hockey player. And I think I had a mind for the game and I wasn't the strongest. I wasn't the fastest. I wasn't the biggest, but I was still able to get a Division I college scholarship to Northeastern. I went to Brown. I played Division I. And I think it's because I used my strengths to my advantage. And although I wasn't the strongest, biggest, fastest, I was able to lean on the things and the skills that I was really good at. So I would say having a mind for the game, being a team player, being a playmaker. I would always pass the puck before I would shoot it. Right now, I think as I'm older, I'm more confident. I wish I had taken more shots, but I think it's one of those things that you need to know yourself, and that's in sales too. Like what are you good at, and being yourself on the phone is one of I think the keys to success, because people can read when you're being inauthentic. And so I think in hockey, in life, and in sales, what served me well and took me a long time to do is just truly leaning into being authentically myself.
I love that. We have 3 core values. It's actually the only payment we ask for from our athletes and veterans is that they commit to our 3 core values, which are accountability, coachability, and authenticity. Because I think authenticity is like foundational as a business professional, but especially as a salesperson.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, anyone can hand you a playbook, right? In hockey, you can be handed a playbook of plays. The great thing about hockey is it's a super creative sport, right? So at the end of the day, unlike a football or some of these other sports where you have designed plays, you can take liberties. And I think someone can hand you a sales playbook, but you need to find what works for you and what, and I think where you are most authentically yourself. I agree with you completely.
100%. Now, obviously, Brown is an unbelievable academic institution, an Ivy League. Did you so hockey's coming to an end? Did you have a plan? What was your major? Where was your head at those last 6 months?
It's so funny that you say that, because anyone that knows me would say I'm a planner, right? But I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I think I thought I wanted to be in finance, and I can kind of speak to this, but I got out of school. It was also the economy was awful. You know what I mean? Yep. I graduated in 2009, 2010 timeframe. And, the economy was not in a good place. My family, luckily, I was very privileged and grateful to have connections. And in the Boston area, I was able to work in finance for a period of time at a hedge fund and do something, but it just wasn't me. And I think what I would say to anybody is you just know when something doesn't quite fit. And I was frankly pretty lost. I was genuinely between 22, 23 and 25, extremely lost. And I was working in finance, really unhappy. And I had interned at HubSpot. in college for a guy, Mark Roberge, and this guy, Mike Volpe, who was our CMO at the time, both transformative people at HubSpot. And there was no entry level positions there at the time. It was because they were, kind of growing the business. They were hiring people who worked at EMC and had some more senior experience. And then they had a BDR position open up for this guy, Pete Caputa, who ended up running our partner team. And I remember I did the interview. I walked the floor. The minute I walked the floor, I knew that's where I wanted to be. They had a vision. They had a culture code that Dharmesh created. They had an incredible just buzz on the floor. Like, it was exactly where I wanted to be, and I knew I wanted to be there. A week later, I accepted the job. And in a week after that, I was on the phones. And I think being there, being on the floor, being in that grind, having a common vision, HubSpot was the right place, right time, right people, right product, right everything. And it's single-handedly been the most transformative experience of my entire life, besides having my child.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, HubSpot was obviously a wagon. I came up right behind HubSpot at Turbo. And to your point, like, those types of companies at those stages, and we're trying to build that here in our office now on Boylston Street, you can just like feel the energy when you walk in the door and you're like, this is electric. Like, I need to be part of this thing.
Yeah. And something I think I wanted to like impress upon people, like at a HubSpot, right? Or in sports or in any of these things, is like, nothing is instant gratification, right? Like, I started out at 25, okay? And I know that seems young, but if you're in a career for a couple of years, right? I started over. So I had to start from scratch. I became a BDR. I was a BDR for 2 years. And that was for a whole bunch of different reasons. I was the top performing BDR probably in the history of the company at the time. Number one in 2012, number one in 2013. But I had to put in like an immense amount of work and hours, just like pounding the phones and just working for these sales reps, learning, listening to calls, making a bunch of mistakes. It was not like glamorous or fun or, it was just like every single day, like getting on the green line, getting to work at 6 a.m. I would leave at 7 o'clock every single night for 2 years. And there was not a ton of money behind it. And at the time, yes, there was stock for sure. I was getting like granted stock because of experiments and different things, which was a really special benefit of HubSpot. But at the time, HubSpot was like a 150 person company. It wasn't like that stock was paying my bills, right? And I think in any company that you go to, especially when you're entry level, you have to just be willing to do anything. Someone asks you to do something, you pretend you can do it. Someone wants you to pick up the phones, you stay late, you get in early. You do everything the way you're supposed to do it, and you just keep doing that day after day after day, month after month after month, after years. And honestly, like I can say with sports is the same thing. You're putting money in the bank every single day in practice. You're putting that work in, and you're not seeing the results right away. You're not just winning national championships or getting a Division I scholarship from one practice, right? It's from 10,000 practices. And so something I would tell someone is like, yeah, that during that time I was pissed. I was a BDR for 2 years, but it served me so well. I've been at HubSpot 13 years now. That work I put in the beginning laid the foundation for everything I do now. So that's what I would tell someone is like, just instant gratification is not going to get you where you want to go. And also like doing everything that you do, regardless of money or accolades, with intention, right? Like the way you pass the puck, the way you put on your equipment, the way you get up in the morning, the way you talk to yourself in the shower, the way you talk to yourself after a good play, the way you talk to yourself after a bad play. All of those things translate from sports into sales, because you're not always going to have people being like, go Jen, crush it today. You have to be like that person for yourself.
Yeah.
And I think those 2 years as a BDR at HubSpot, as well as like that time in sports, taught me that.
I love it. I used to coach youth hockey in South Boston, a U16 team, and I used to tell these kids, like, listen, you don't win the national championship in April, you win it in July. Like that's, you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Which stinks to hear, but
It's true.
when
Though.
you're young, you want to, but yeah, I agree completely.
That idea though, like that's so important. Like we don't talk about that enough. That like comfort with delayed gratification is a characteristic of athletes and honestly military veterans too, because of the training and the boot camps they go through before they're in combat. Like that's such a rare characteristic for, especially nowadays with everything at your fingertips. That's such a rare characteristic for people nowadays that we should definitely talk about more.
Yeah.
One of the things that like really bothers me, I think it's criminal how like people that come from schools like Brown and Holy Cross and these great academic institutions are kind of fed this idea that like finance is the path. Like if you want to be wealthy, and it's such bullshit, excuse my French, because there are so many other ways to like have success if financial outcomes are important to you. So I'm glad it stinks that you had to figure it out by doing it, but sometimes that's just how it works out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I wouldn't change anything, right?
No.
It's like I think a lot of like if you really think about any of this stuff, right? It's like I have gratitude for all of it, and I think if you can lead with, and it's taken me a long time to get here, don't get me wrong. I've had moments where you feel bad for yourself, or you're like annoyed that you weren't there faster. But like just be grateful you have a job. Be grateful that you can learn lessons. Like I'm glad I went through that time. I wouldn't know that HubSpot was amazing and that I wanted to, that was what I wanted if I didn't know what I didn't want. And I agree with you that there's a million ways to slice an onion, there's a million ways to make money. And I think, yeah, finance is the path for certain people, certain personalities. It wasn't for mine. And I think leaning into the fact that there are a million different ways to make money besides finance is extremely important to remember. Yes.
Yes. Especially for the next generation. You talked about like that delayed gratification and just like that discipline and commitment to show up for the time you did for two years straight. What were other things that you recognized like in those first 2 years where you were like, wow, sales is just like sports. Like not so much your intangibles, but like the environment that you were in.
Yeah, I mean, like another thing that I would like say like about sales, right? Specifically like sports. Like it's your daily habits and the little things that really dictate everything, right? And so like what I would say is like in sports, right? Like I'll give you an example. Like I was up at Lake Placid at the U16 under 16 camp. We had a practice. Ben Smith was the coach of the 98, 2002, 2006 Olympics. Ran a practice and I go and I pass the puck. It's like a dot-to-dot practice. We're 2 minutes into practice. There's like, you're probably practicing at the U16 camp for like 4 hours a day. And I passed the puck and he basically was like, is that really, like he stopped the play, stopped the practice. And he was like, is that really the hard, like pulled me aside. He didn't yell at me in front of everyone. Pulled me aside and was like, is that really as hard as you can pass the puck? And I was like, yeah, I passed it pretty hard. He's like, no, you didn't. So he passes the puck as hard as he can to the person on the other dot, right? And he was just trying to teach me a lesson of like everything you do, every little thing, and every single moment matters, right? And I passed the puck as hard as I could. I think my arms were falling off after the practice. Like he was just trying to, and I think my point of saying that it's the intention with which you do everything in your environment. And when I was at HubSpot in those first 2 years, you're not just smiling and dialing. You're being deliberate in what you do. You're picking target accounts. You're calling them deliberately. You're asking people thoughtful, intelligent questions. You're not asking questions to ask questions. You're asking questions to be curious, to learn about what someone's trying to achieve. You're asking questions to really uncover a business problem that they have and a pain that they have so that you can figure out whether it's a good fit. And not everyone's going to be a good fit, right? You know, at the end of the day, like sometimes you're not getting on the phone to always sell someone. It's a dance, and you're trying to figure out whether or not you guys have mutual alignment. And the intention with which you call people should be from a place, it should have intention behind it. And I think that, like sports and like sales, everything you do needs to be done with specific intention and needs to be done thoughtfully. And when you add up all of those little things is when you make P Club, is when you make Founders Club, is when you win championships, is when you do well. And I think the environment with which I was in at HubSpot is similar to sales because it's super competitive. It's a meritocracy. No one owes you anything. And I think that's another big thing that I had to learn multiple times at HubSpot in 13 years. And I also had to learn from being a coach's daughter, right? People would think it worked in my favor. Many times it didn't, you know? No. And I think adding up all those little things and realizing that the work you put in every day, it is a meritocracy and you have to earn your spot every single moment of every day with the little things that you do. And I think just sales and sports is like this. Like it's a meritocracy. It's what have you done for me lately? You know, Tom Brady can speak better than anyone. You could be the best player on the planet Earth to ever play the game. And, you know, people only care what you do in this moment right now for them and how you're producing for them. And the only way I think you continue to show up and you continue to do well is by doing the little things every day to get where you're looking to go.
This is why I have this sign here every single day to remind myself that nobody cares. Work harder.
Yeah, no, it's true. You know, you and I get it. Like you would hope you put 10 years in, you know, a perennial, you know, P Club rep, you know, you always at 125%. Sales and sports, you're either getting better or you're getting worse, you know? And so if you're not putting in the work every single day, someone else will take that spot from you. And that's something I learned at HubSpot really quickly. You know, if you're in this environment where everyone is just like a dog eat dog, the cream of the crop rise to the top. And that is exactly the same as sports.
100%. Now let's talk. So you did the 2 years in finance, you find HubSpot, you can't like help yourself but join the team. I understand you had like a really good first year. What led, do you think, to that initial kind of success? Like what was the mindset where you were like, all right, like, you know, your athletic background helped, but like let's get tactical a little bit. Like what were the things that you did on a day-to-day basis that like separated you from the pack?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this to preface that, and this goes to Robert, this goes to Mike Volpe, this goes to Pete Caputa, but you are only as good as your mentors. And I believe that. And as someone new at a company, you need to find people and be proactive about saying, I want help. Can you sit with me for an hour? Can I listen to one of your calls? It's not on the leader necessarily or the person that's managing your team to do it for you. You have to do it for yourself. And I think one thing that I really did is, one, I had no fear. Like I wasn't afraid to ask for help. I wasn't afraid to ask to jump on calls. I wasn't afraid to, if someone gave me a project, if Pete gave me a project and said, hey, we need to call all these partners and upload all these leads and you have to do this by this date. Okay, I'll do it. Are you sure you know how? Yep, I'll figure it out. Like, be the first one to just like pretend that you know what you're doing until you don't. But I think not having fear of asking for help, you're only as good as the talent around you and asking for help. And also, just like sports, showing up first, leaving last, and putting the most effort in. You know, speaking of Tom Brady again, I think I'm thinking about him because of his speech recently, but like discipline and consistency are everything. Like absolutely the foundation of everything good comes from discipline and consistency. And in that year's time, I had a bad experience in finance. I did not want to screw it up. I couldn't screw it up. And when you don't have a plan B, plan A always works. And because I had nothing to lose and I had everything to gain. And all I had to do was really, truly be my own advocate, but also more importantly, just work harder than everybody else. And I think a lot of leaders at HubSpot would say, I might have not been the best sales rep. I might have not been the most polished. I might not have been the most tactical, but I was a honey badger and I worked my butt off. And I wasn't afraid to try what I needed to try to get where I wanted to go.
100%. That's good. I love the honey badger reference. There's probably people, most people are probably maybe too young to know what that means.
There's all different types of salespeople, right? Like there's a guy, Morgan Jacobson, who worked at our team. He was the savviest, smoothest guy you've ever heard on the phone, right? That wasn't me. And then just like in sports, right? I'm never gonna be Megan Duggan. But you don't need to be Megan Duggan. I just needed to be the best Jenny Cedarchuk that I could be. And so I think in sales and in sports, you're always just trying to, if you're not the best, if you're not Wayne, the great one, if you're not Wayno, like you got to figure out what you're good at, be the best at it, and work harder than everybody else.
Absolutely. You gotta, again, it's like back to the basics, control the controllables, you can't do anything else. There's like things that matter, things that you can control, and you got to focus on that like overlap and that Venn diagram, and that's it. That's the difference between stress and pressure, I always say. One of the like core concepts that we teach to, future sales professionals is this idea of an operating rhythm. I think the way you structure your day, your week, your month, your quarter is so critical. And I think it's one of the many reasons that we see so much success in athletes and veterans. Was that a part of like those initial couple years? Was like, because you come from an extremely structured environment as a college athlete and you step into a sales role where there's a little ambiguity depending on what organization you're at. Was that helpful to you coming from that structured environment into a sales role?
For sure. And I think it's the key to success today in what I do on a day-to-day basis at HubSpot. Obviously, we've grown. I started at the company when we were 150 people. I want to say we're 8,800, 9,000 globally now. Structuring your day and being disciplined in what you're going to do on your calendar is the foundation of everything good. And I think it applies to hockey too, right? It's like, okay, I'm waking up. I got to get, shaken. I got to get my classes. I got to get my classes in the morning because I don't know, but if everyone is a college athlete, but we don't get to take school whenever we want. We got to take school in a very finite amount of time so that we can then go to practice at noon and be at the rink for 8 hours. And then go home and do our homework when we get back from the rink at 8. And yes, I would say at HubSpot, crafting your day, getting in early, planning on a Sunday what your week's going to look like, figuring out what you're going to have for the week, building out meetings with your BDRs, building out meetings to prospect target accounts, LinkedIn Navigator time, making sure that you're really thinking through what you're doing on the partner. We have a partner team, working with the partner team, structuring your calendar and how you structure your calendar and being disciplined to stick to that schedule is foundational to being good long-term, because being scattered when it comes to sales can be a killer for sure.
Totally. And it like, to be fair, it changes depending on the role, right? Like your operating rhythm as a BDR is going to be different than your operating rhythm as an AE and a leader. And, I'm first time CEO the last 2 years, and I'm candidly like, I'm still figuring it out, right? Like, and as we grow, like it changes, right? I used to say, like, when we were like 3 people, I'm like Bugs Bunny playing baseball. I'm throwing it, I'm hitting it, and I'm catching it. Like, that's it. Now it's hard for me to pull myself away from things that I'm like, well, let me do that. And, thankfully I've hired other executives that are like, dude, why are you doing this? Like, you're the CEO, you shouldn't be doing this. And I'm like, all right, I got it.
And I think that's a good lesson too with sports, right? And what you just said about being a CEO, right? If you're overwhelmed, like don't quit, right? Like in 13 years at HubSpot and in sports, right? Or anything you do, like there are going to be times where you want to give up so badly. There's going to be times where you are so overwhelmed. Your calendar seems like you just can't get a minute. You are so like, I don't know what I'm going to do next. Don't quit, just like rest, reset, think about your schedule, get organized, and then move forward. Like, trust me, there was, like I said, HubSpot has literally been the single best experience of my entire life, besides having my child and getting married. The people that worked at that company are still my best friends. And I literally love the place more than I could possibly express. But yeah, in 13 years, I probably wanted to quit like 10 times, for so many different reasons, but in sports too, you just don't want to show up to practice that day. You don't want to do, you don't want to go and your legs are killing you. You just had a game. You have to go back to practice. Maybe you lost on the weekend to Harvard. You're showing up on Monday. You're miserable. But like, you just get in the middle of practice and you just keep going and you get organized. And that's the same as a CEO or a sales rep or a BDR. Like, if you want to quit, just rest and like recalibrate and then move forward. And I can promise you it's worked for me more than 10 times in all these years.
I love it. This has been awesome. I'm so excited to launch this episode. We ask every guest 2 questions at the end. The first one is, why do you love sales?
Because I'm competitive. Like point blank, like we have dashboards at our company that show where you stand, and I don't like looking at them if I'm not on the top. I'm just super, super competitive, and I want to win. I just straight up want to win. And yeah, there's many reasons I like sales. As you can tell, I like to talk, but also I've learned to shut my mouth and listen, because that's more what sales is about. People think sales is about talking, but really it's about going on mute. But yeah, I'm just super competitive and I love winning, and I love learning new things. Sales is all about continually learning, which I think is another part of it that keeps my my personality happy.
Yes. Yeah, that scoreboard, man, like people I used to keep a bottle of Heinz ketchup on my desk in my first job, because we would do like green, yellow, red, depending on the metrics you were on. And like, I did not want, we used to call it ketchup. I don't want any ketchup on my dashboard. Like, it's got to be a lot of relish. That's what we talk about here. We need all relish.
Yeah, totally.
I love it. That's awesome. Last question. When I started the company, people that weren't athletes or veterans would ask me like, JR, how come you're affecting the total addressable market that you can go after, because you're only focusing on this like population, right? Which is like pretty like arrogant or ignorant, because 300,000 athletes and veterans enter the job market every year. It's a massive market. That market grows by 300,000 people every year. But my answer was always the same. I'm like, listen, the best salespeople that I've ever worked with, that ever worked for me, that I've come across, when someone says like, why are they a great salesperson? I'm like, they're dialed in. That's like a kind of a catch-all term for me. And I'm always curious to get our guest perspective. Like, what is being dialed in sales? What does that mean to you?
It's a great question. I'll relate it to sports. But what being dialed in means to me, just like in sports, you put in work every single practice. You put in work every single day, not in a game. You're putting in the work. You're putting the money in the bank, right? And then my dad would always say, then you get into the game and you have what's called the bounce, where you're just on autopilot, right? You're thinking in practice. You're thinking. Then you get into a game and you just sort of go subconscious. Like, you just have the bounce. And I think the same thing applies to sales, right? You're calling, you're dialing, you're booking meetings, you're booking your demos, you're doing all of this work day in, day out. You're listening to calls, you're listening to your own calls, you're listening to other people's calls. And then all of a sudden you'll get into a day and you can almost go into autopilot on your calls. You can almost go into autopilot while you're prospecting. And all of a sudden you've booked 7 meetings. And that's what I would call, my dad would call it, my Steve Cedar Truck's my dad, and he was a coach for a long time, still is. And that bounce, you can almost like feel it. It's like buoyant, and you can feel it in sales too. But I don't think you get dialed in without doing the work, right? It's like you do all this work, and then what I would call is you almost go on autopilot, and you can feel that bounce, and you can feel it in sports, and you can feel it in sales. So to be dialed in for me is when I've got the bounce.
I love that. I love the bounce, and I will confirm that Jen's dad is a legend. I always love, my favorite guests are guests that are also, I'm the son of a coach, Hall of Fame high school hockey coach in Marlboro, and there's just so, like, you just have a different experience as a kid, like that nobody understands except for us. Like, you just have to live it.
Being a coach's kid is, I would never trade it for anything in the world. I love my dad more than anything, but it definitely is a unique experience that shapes your entire perspective.
Totally. It ain't easy, but it's worth it.
Yeah, for sure.
This was awesome. Thank you so much for giving us your time. I know you're super busy. We really appreciate it. This was incredible. I can't thank you enough. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah. I'm so grateful to be on, and I'm so happy for your business, and I'm just happy to be here. I'm so glad that we were able to do this.
This wraps up this episode of Merchants of Change. If you enjoyed this episode, the most meaningful way to say thanks is to submit a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're interested in working with us, please come find us at www.shiftgroup.io.